Hello and welcome. Today we're going to learn how to use embedded resources, Resx files, and local files with Picturebox. Here I have a new wisej.net 4 project. Let's go ahead and open up the designer. You can click on the toolbox over here and add a Picturebox. And right away you'll notice there are two ways to add images. So over here we have image and we have ImageSource. The difference between these is that the image property directly accepts an instance of system.drawing.image. That means you typically load the image into memory first. So if I look over here, you can see that's what that looks like. And ImageSource, on the other hand, accepts a string representing a URL or a path to an image file. wisej.net then handles the loading of the image from that specified source. So over here you can see ImageSource looks like this when I go to open it up. One thing to note is that an SVG can't be an image, only an ImageSource, because you can't load an SVG into a system.drawing.image. So if I have something like a PNG or a JPG file, I could do it either way, image or ImageSource, and you'll see that later in the video. But SVG has to be an ImageSource. Okay, let's go ahead and get some images. So over here I have a folder. I just have a few PNG images, a JPG, and an SVG. So let's go ahead and just copy that. There we go, there's our images folder. And let's go ahead and start by loading an image as an embedded resource. So an embedded resource is a file that's compiled directly into your application assembly, the DLL. You can set a file as an embedded resource by right-clicking on it and setting the build action to embedded resource. So here's apple.png. So you see when I click on it, it says build action none. So let's change that to embedded resource. Okay, so now it's an embedded resource. So how do I get it in my Picturebox? I can set the image source. So again, remember this is the one that takes like a URL or a path. And you'll notice now that I have set it as an embedded resource, when I click here, I see it pop up here as an option. So I can just click OK, and there it is. It's working as an embedded resource. So what does this code look like behind the scenes? Well, we can look at our designer file. And if I look, there we go, picturebox.imageSource, resource.wx/wisej-webpage-application13/images/apple.png. So this string over here is just the format resource.wx/the namespace/the folder/the file name, right? Remember, this is our folder here, our images folder, and then our file name is apple.png. So if I just wanted to run this code, so I'm going to go ahead and delete this code. If I look back at my designer, you'll see my image is gone, right? So you can also just run this code just manually, right, instead of setting it in the designer. So let's just go ahead and do that manually. So if I go to page 1 and then the load function, and just paste this in here. And so now if you look, it's still not in the designer, but at runtime on page load, that'll load my Apple image. So let's go ahead and run this. And there it is. Okay, so that's how to add an embedded resource. So next let's do a Resx file. So a Resx file, which is an XML-based resource file, stores strings, images, icons, and other data in a structured way. It gets compiled into a resources binary and is often used for localization. So how can I add it to a Resx file? So if you look over here, under properties, we have resources.resx, and I can right-click open that. If I click on the plus icon over here, I can add a new resource. And our type is going to be an image. For value, we need to select file. We've already done some stuff with the apple file, so let's go ahead and use our frog.png file. Let's see. So there's our frog file. And then we click on add. So now you can see this has been added as a Resx file. And now I just need to go ahead and load it into the Picturebox. So there are two ways to do this. We can do it through the designer or we can do it through code. So let's do it in the designer first. Okay, so now that we've got our Resx file, let's go ahead and add it. I've created a new Picturebox over here. And I can go to image and you'll see it actually pops up as an option right now that we've added it to our resources.resx. So if I click OK, there we go, there's my frog image loaded. The other thing we can do is if I click on import, I can import new things. So now let's go ahead and add maybe our apple as a Resx file. If I click on open, OK. Oh, sorry. Right, there's our apple. Sorry, let me restart Visual Studio here. So if I go here, image, right, apple, okay, right, so there is my apple as a resources. And if I go to resources.resx, you can see apple has been added, right? So you can add them to the resources file by using the plus icon, or you can do it in the designer as you are adding the images. You'll notice here that we have two options here. We have a local resource option when we have a project resource file option. So the project resource file refers to an asset stored in the project's resx file, in our case properties/resources.resx. It becomes embedded in the assembly during compilation and is accessible using properties.resources, which you'll see in a second when I do this through code. The local resource, however, is an image stored directly in that former controls resx file. So if we look here, you can see page1.resx. So if I store it here, it would be stored in page1.resx. So let's go ahead and import one. Let's do the tree and click OK, and there's our tree, right? So that resource is scoped to that specific form of user control. So the downside of doing it is that it's only available for this form. So again, if I look in resources.resx, you'll see the tree is not there, right? It's not in my global resources.resx. It's only for page1.resx. So this is useful if you have a maybe a specific image that's only going to be used in that page. But in general, you're always going to want to just put them in this project resource file, the global one. Okay, so we've done that through the designer. Let's go ahead and do this through code. So let me switch this to a global one. We'll do the apple. And again, let's look at that code in the designer.cs file. So this should be Picturebox 2. Right, properties.resources.apple. So let's go ahead and do this code. Go ahead and clear this image so I can prove to you that it's being done entirely through code. Picturebox2.image. And I believe it should be able to just do properties.resources.apple. We shouldn't need this global thing here. So let's go ahead and test that out. There we go. So we've got the apple. And then if we look in our resources.resx, you remember we also have the frog. So let's also try properties.resources.resx. frog. And there's the frog image. Oh yeah, one side note here. You notice these images are all really zoomed in. That is pretty easy to fix if I just change size to zoom. Then we should be able to see the full image. And let me just run that real quick. There we go. So now you can see the full image. So that's why we weren't seeing the full image before. It's just the size mode was set to normal. Anyways, so that is a Resx file. So the last thing we can do is we can use a local file. So a local file is simply a file in the server's file system or deployed with the application. And we can just use the file path to locate it. So let's add a new Picturebox. And if I go to ImageSource, if I look in images, you can see we have all of these, right? So let's do my SVG image, for example, right? And you just see it says images/cloud SVG, right? So let's look at the code here. So Picturebox 3.ImageSource images/cloud SVG repo.com/.svg. And if I were to get rid of that and then do it through the page win.load. And there we go, we have our 3 images. So this first one is a resource file, right? ImageSource equals resource.wx. The second one is a Resx file, properties.resources.frog. And this third one is just a local resource. Let's go ahead and do another local resource with one that's not an SVG real quick. So we'll just add another Picturebox. And again, there are 2 ways to do this. So we can set the image source to be something like the tree. Set size mode to zoom. And let's run that. Alright, so there we have it. I've shown you how to load files as a embedded resource, a Resx file, and as a local resource into a Picturebox. I hope you enjoyed this video. Stay tuned for more. Bye!